Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Crystal Earth podcast. I'm your host, Monet Noctaris, also known as the Black Rose of Gaia. And I feel like it has been forever ago that I recorded a podcast. I feel like so much has happened in between the last one I recorded and today. So there's some new things going on in the planetary field and my own field. So we'll get into it. I was just hiding. I was hiding. I was just hiding from a solicitor who who came to my door because my door is like right here and there's a big window. And I was like, I do not want to talk to this person because I know he's going to make eye contact with me through that window. So I just like dodged out of his sight line that way. Yes, it's like I don't have the patience or the spoons today to talk to some stranger about solar panels. So you'd probably be like, "Who is this crazy witch?" So anyway, that's just how I roll. I'm like, if I don't know you and you don't look like you're somebody like fundraising for your school or something, I'm just gonna go that way. So anyway, hi. Oh my God, what was I saying? So tonight I am teaching my first class in my Crystalline Lineage Series, which I'm really excited for. It's all on Mintaka, and I'm going to be channeling Melura, my Mintakan parallel, and the Mintakan crystal itself. So if you aren't attending the workshop and you would like to watch it after it's over, I am going to be reselling the whole series so that if you missed it, you can still experience it because I think it's going to be pretty powerful. I'm really having a lot of fun with this whole series in general because it's actually having me kind of like revisit some of my earlier work. I've been talking a long time about the book I've been writing that hasn't surfaced yet. I would say, like, I stopped writing it right before the override started. And it's a channeled book with like all of these primary incarnations of myself that all kind of like led up to the override and the mission. And so it's separated into these different arcs. So the Mintakan arc is really beautiful. And I was rereading pieces of it yesterday because I'm actually going to be including some of that in the workshop as a way for people to kind of experience what Mintaka felt like instead of just giving history information. So I'm going to be reading a few excerpts from it and oh my gosh, I reading it just like brought me back and I was just I cried a lot while I read it. Um I you might also notice my field is like really open right now. Um I'll get into why, if I'm a little get a little like emotional as I'm recording this. There's a reason. There's a reason. My field is undergoing some restructuring currently. So I'll explain why in a minute. But forgive me if I get a little weepy here. But I did want to show you some of my cool Mintaka stuff I'm going to be including. I did try to do my makeup Mintaka core today, switched it up a little bit for my usual like purples and stuff. So, if you don't know what Mintaka is, sorry, I didn't explain that first. Mintaka was this oceanic planet civilization that was in the Orion constellation, as it was then. It's a pretty ancient civilization. One of my past fractals of myself. Her name is Melura. And, there's all these like merfolk and aquatic beings there. And she was a song singer. That was like her function within the planet as like a frequency function, where it's kind of like the Mintaka crystal and the bloom, which are both these crystalline entities that lived in Mintaka or resided in Mintaka and are now, they've been kind of transformed, moved to Earth and seeded here into the new grid here. She worked with them, and her voice through song tended them and harmonized the field there through these crystals. So I'm going to be channeling her tonight. I wanted to show off a couple of the crystals that I'm going to be bringing with me here that have some kind of like Mintakan frequencies, I would say. So here's one. This is a selenite Merkaba, which is two tetrahedrons that kind of click into each other to form a six-pointed star, right? Six. And I count. I don't know, however many points this is. That's a Merkaba. Which is, I could do a whole talk on Merkabas, but you can also look that up. There's plenty of information about what a Merkaba is. But it's kind of, we all have one. It's part of our light body, and the Earth has one too. And this one here, this one is so enthusiastic. She always wants to say hi. Ah! This one is a Celestite. And to me, she just really resonates with the crystalline vaults of Mintaka and the dragons that live within, because there are a lot of water dragons from Mintaka that now have become vault guardians here on Earth. And then lastly, I just want to show you this. This is my wand. It's made from, it's made from, I forget which type of tree, but this is made of tree. Some sort of branch with, it's coated in silver, and it's got a little aura quartz here. And this one, to me, this really resonates with the bloom, which is the crystalline field from Mintaka that was then brought to Earth and used in Lemuria. I've mentioned it's what makes water living and crystalline. And the bloom is a big part of what comes next as the field begins to resonate with it again, as this borrowed consciousness, crystalline consciousness from Mintaka. So I'm going to tell you some planetary update stuff. And then I found a little section from my book that I actually wanted to read that I was revisiting that made me just really connect a lot of the things that I've been doing over the past several months since I stopped writing the book. So much has happened, and we're kind of right on the precipice of the next part of what comes next for Earth. And I think it'll be a nice way to tie it together. So with that, I want to tell you, I mentioned like my field might feel a little different today. It might feel more still and less charged. So that's because we're kind of in between things currently. I'm like still holding my wand. Maybe I'll keep holding it. It's because we're kind of like, we're in between the inhale and the exhale of this planetary shift. As I've mentioned before, Earth's grid system is switching to a tone-based system. And as it does, because it hasn't fully yet, it's not perceptible yet to humans. It's not perceptible yet to me, even. I may understand intellectually what a tone-based system will be like and what it does, but because it hasn't fully switched over yet and isn't broadcasting tone yet, it's like I can describe it, but I can't feel it because it hasn't existed yet on this planet, at least in this configuration that we're moving into. And so I'm getting flickers of it, but I'm not yet experiencing the world through tone. But for me to be able to do that, what's had to happen is that I've had to kind of unplug and discharge from the old way which is of charge and of polarity and electromagnetism. And so my field right now is kind of like a still pool. It's a little boring. I'll have to say, I'm not as like bombastic as I usually feel. So I'm in a liminal space a little bit. So you might sense that in my energy. The other big thing that has shifted since the last time I recorded a podcast, this is a pretty big major one. And this is what I really wanted to talk about mostly today because you, yes, you, every single person watching this, part of it. So let me explain. So approximately 52,000 years ago, before human civilization really even existed, something began to shift in Earth's field and drift. So each planet has something called a planetary heart grid or heart circuit. As I've mentioned, Earth's grid is really a lattice. It's made up of many different grids that all kind of work with each other and form this kind of like symbiotic relationship. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get into, and that has to do with the book excerpt I'm going to read. But this heart grid, it is what allows the people of a planet and the animals and plants, every living aspect, even the living water, to be able to feel and have their heartbeat synced up and beating with the planet itself. Remember, planets have consciousness. Gaia is Earth's planetary consciousness who volunteered for this job, which I'll get into in a little bit, actually. And so with that, around 52,000 years ago, there started to become a bit of a natural separation of the heart field from the rest of the planet. And this was due to electromagnetic reasons, mostly at first, and tectonic reasons. So it was kind of like a natural separation that started where you could almost think of it as like Gaia's heart was not beating in sync with the living beings. And so it kind of created a little bit of distance. So then over time, things I've mentioned how there have been all these big fractures in the grid, how distortion came into play. And so as that happened, unfortunately, it just kind of broke the connection between Gaia's heart field and the human species. And so what you eventually got was what we see today and what we've been seeing since written record of human history. I talked a lot about the overbalance in masculine polarity on this planet, which, by the way, since the last podcast I recorded, there's that guy again. Okay, good. He's not coming here. So since the last time I recorded a podcast, the masculine lattice is now circulating current. It's on. So now it's still got to balance itself out. But the imbalance in the masculine polarity definitely was a big factor in the war and the violence and a lot of the problems that we see on this planet. But I think it was reinforced and made worse by the fracture of the heart grid. Because think about it, imbalance in the masculine polarity, which leads to domination, control, extraction, manipulation, war. Without a heart, like, that's even worse. So as humans evolved, they became disconnected from their hearts, from compassion, from empathy, from kindness and care, and from any sense of like a matriarchal structure, which by nature centers care and compassion and community, right? It's kind of like worst case scenario here, which is why we got to where we are today. as a species. Hooray, go us. So it's changing though. That's why we're doing this. So something happened, not last Saturday, but the Saturday before, where Heart Grid came online the first time. Now that Earth's grid and field is structurally corrected, the heart of the planet could beat again in phase with the human species. This created the heart circuit. So when this came online, total surprise to me. I had no idea that was coming, to be perfectly honest. I was like, what is going on? Oh yeah, you know how last episode I talked about crystalline architecture, and I mentioned I had a Stargate in my heart, and that it didn't really hasn't been used in a long time. I wasn't sure if it was ever going to be used again. Well, uh, that's how this came online, was through my heart field. Someday I'll tell the story of who brought it through and how it happened when the field is ready for it. But planetary heart began to beat again, and then it phase locked is what they called it. Phase locked with my counterpart, who's the masculine keystone, who I talked about a couple podcasts ago, and created this standing wave that then began to be amplified throughout the heart grid and the heart circuit. So this is where you come in. So the heart grid and the heart circuit is made up of countless beating hearts across the planet. And so basically you can think of it as like the vaults and the planet was like scanning for who has a coherent heart field. You know, who out there is able to feel compassion and empathy and love and kindness and care. And you, if you're one of those people, became part of the heart circuit. And so it is now expanding. And if you have this, right, which if you're listening to this, my guess is you do, because you're, especially if you're a crystalline being or just anyone who is seeking to understand themselves, to understand the world, what's going on from a place of genuine concern and searching for understanding when the world no longer makes sense, then you're part of it. And you, as you are online within the heart grid, are in training those around you, whether it be in your family, your community, your workplace, anywhere you go, you are becoming a heart node within the circuit, which affects everyone around you. And it creates this ripple effect. And so if you have been feeling, I mentioned I've been a little weepy lately. There's a few reasons for that. But if you have been feeling weepy, or you've been having a lot of emotions come to the surface, or it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm just feeling everything, it's because the heart circuit's online. And so your heart is beating in sync, in phase with Gaia's heart and all other humans who are also connected to the circuit. And so the goal, what will happen over time through entrainment, is that the whole planet begins to come online and beat in sync, in time, in phase with Gaia. And that's how it was always meant to be. That's the original design. So if you're feeling a lot, just allow it. I know it might feel like all the stuff's bubbling to the surface, but it's because you're opening. You're opening. And it won't feel as intense forever. I'm personally feeling it very intensely because, you know how I mentioned last episode when I was talking about crystalline architecture, how when I had my boot up, right, it was like my whole perception changed. Everything changed for me. And for me, that was really in a cognitive way. It affected my brain mostly. But what I've been experiencing, once the heart grid came online through my field began restructuring. itself. I went through basically a whole change in how my field operates, from going and how I channel too, actually, from going from like top down, through the mind to through the heart first. I perceive the world heart first, heart forward as my function changes. So, boy, that's been interesting. It's been like everything, basically everything is just coming to the surface. So that's why I actually recorded this podcast like way later than I had hoped to, because I was like, you know what? I probably should not be talking about anything to people for a while my field kind of like calms down. I would say it has not calmed down quite yet. So I would say that now I'm kind of in the still point where a lot, but it's not destabilizing me every single time. And this is really leading up to what comes next, which is something called the mirror bloom, when Earth finally begins broadcasting coherence through the grid as a tone-based system. But I'm not going to bother explaining currently what that will feel like, because I'm still orienting to what that will be. So right now, think about it as just being in the in-between. Collective emotions are surfacing. We're feeling everything. Things feel a little bit quiet because the charge has decreased in preparation for the exhale of tone. So since I do have to conserve my energy a bit, since I am doing my workshop tonight, I did want to read that excerpt though, and talk just a little bit about why Earth is so special. The override here and what we're doing here, so much bigger than just this local to Earth shift. It's actually the key to bringing balance to other areas of the galaxy and even other realms and universes within the multiverse. This override is actually it connects to the cosmic override, which is way bigger than all of this. And I'll explain a little bit about that as I read this here. So I'll give you a little context. So in my book, as I kind of go through these different arcs, there's a Mintaka arc, Lemuria arc, Atlantis arc, oh, and a Lyra arc as well, which you may or may not know about. Lyra, those were the first memories, past life memories that came up for me years ago now, was connected to that civilization, which also fell like Mintaka, and it was targeted. And so in the Mintaka arc, Earth and Gaia come into the picture. It's actually, to set up the scene, this is a meeting that's happening in the early Galactic Federation before kind of corruption infiltrated that organization. Um, this is the early days when Earth was just being seeded. And it was seeded. I haven't really talked about this, I don't think, on either podcast. Earth was seeded as a fallback node because distortion wasn't just spreading locally, planet by planet. It was spreading throughout the entire galaxy. And so what needed to happen was they knew at some point the distortion was going to have to be overridden. That was the only way to do it. So Earth became a fallback node so that in case distortion was not be able to be eradicated from all these other civilizations that were falling because of it, because it was seeded intentionally into the grid by groups that wanted to control each of these planets and civilizations, like control the whole galaxy. And they did it by targeting the grids of each individual civilization, including Lyra as the first one to fall. Earth was seeded in a way where it was known that Earth was probably going to be targeted at some point. But the human species and the grid here was designed in such a way that it would be diverse. It would be unable to be broken once Earth did awaken. And the species itself, the human species, our DNA was designed to be able to awaken precisely at the time that the grid awakens. And Gaia herself, she volunteered and consented to be the planetary consciousness, knowing that Earth was probably going to be targeted. It was probably going to be overrun by distortion, that she was probably going to be used and abused for millennia. But at some point, the dormant crystalline frequencies seated within the grid would be what not only awakens Earth and Earth's people, but also ripples out into the rest of the galaxy and beyond. So, with that, I'm going to read a little bit. The characters here are Corellith. You may have heard me talk about him. He's the Arcturian chief harmonic strategist of the Override, who I work closely with. And there's a Lockbar, which is a being that I've worked closely with over the years. He's from Lyra. So at this point in time, they are talking. This is from the viewpoint of Melura, my Mintakan past self, and she's in this Federation meeting. And they're talking about what Earth is and its place in securing the fate of the rest of the galaxy. He pointed to Earth again. But this node is hidden. Corellith's eyes met the counselors. And now she carries something they couldn't account for. Not just resonance, but resilience. She can hold multiple lineages, multiple frequencies. She's not vulnerable to the same weaknesses that fractured older systems. One of the Lyran counselors spoke softly. You're saying if Earth can awaken, it can seal the fracture? Alakbar nodded. And not just seal it, override it. A hush rippled through the chamber. She's not vulnerable to the same weaknesses that fractured older systems, he said, because she was never built to preserve purity. He gestured, and a series of historical overlays appeared. Faint images of Lyran cities, Mintakan temples, Syrian grid vaults, each complex, elegant, advanced, and each singular, harmonically unified within themselves. Lyra was built on harmonic coherence, refined frequencies, elegantly woven into a shared field. But that refinement became rigidity. Their grids weren't built to bend, only to resonate at the highest tier. He turned to face the council. When dissonance entered the field, it spread like rot. They couldn't process it, couldn't metabolize distortion. What shattered them. It felt like a memory I never lived, like a song cracking in the middle of its own chorus. Corellith shifted the projection to Earth again. But Earth is different. She was seated with contrast. Her field holds polarity, conflict, chaos, and suffering. But it was all part of the blueprint, not as a flaw, but as resilience. She was made to metabolize distortion, transmute it. And that's why she can override the corruption in the grid, not just patch it, not just defend against it, but reintroduce harmony into systems that were already lost. Because when her field fully activates, when the bloom is harmonized with her crystalline core, she won't just hold the codes, broadcast them. Corellith nodded once, a harmonic resonance strong enough to reach across the stars, to unhook the tethering in other systems, to remind them of what they were and what they still can be. She's not just the failsafe. Alakbar completed the sentence. She's the key. So I hope that helps kind of explain a little bit why this is so important and why all of us are a part of this and how big of a ripple this actually will create. It's still hard to conceptualize because the broadcast hasn't begun. But if I know one thing for certain, it's that it is inevitable. And with that, I think we're complete for today. Much love to you all.